Okay, so today we are going to be looking at the Tune Mag 170 hub made by the Tune company from Germany, who are based in Black Forest. This is a high-end, high-price rear hub for either road or mountain bike. This is the non-disc version. Price is about $370, which puts it in the same category as hubs like the White Industry T11, Chris King R45, DT Swiss 240, or the Extra Light Cyber rear hubs. So it's a pretty expensive unit. The hub shell is made of 7075 aluminium, as is the free body unit and the axle. End caps, I think, steel. It uses standard cartridge bearings. It's got three 6803 bearings in it and one 6903. Now a 6803 bearing looks like this, and a 6903 looks like that. So it's got three of these in it, one here, here and here, and the larger bearing sits here on the drive side of the hub shell. In terms of dimensions, it again is pretty standard, 130mm wide in total for the road version. The mountain bike version or disc is 135mm. The distance between the drive side flange and the centre of the hub is 17mm, and the non-drive side is 35.5. The diameter of the drive side hub shell is hub flange, sorry, is 55.5mm, and the non-drive side is 40.9. Pretty classic, pretty standard. It's not super wide, but it's not very narrow either. In terms of its comparison to other hubs in the same class, something like the Extra Light would be wider and therefore would build perhaps a stiffer wheel. But it's comparable to other hubs such as the White Industries and Chris King and so on. Going into more detail then, the non-drive side end cap and the drive side end cap are just pressed onto the axle. Here you can see a drive plate which the cassette sits up against. It's got a rubber seal which sits in a little recess going all the way around to stop as much debris as possible getting into the ratchet mechanism. As it is a relatively soft material on the free body, you're going to get these little nicks in it as your cassette teeth bite into it. That's standard for all lightweight hubs. So this is what it looks like when you've used it for several 100,000 kilometers and put some serious wattage through it, of course. Inside here you can see what looks like washers. We're going to get onto that later, how it all goes together, but that's part of the bearing preload system. This shoulder here is extra material which is required by the hub shell to allow for that larger, the larger bearing to sit in the drive side. The non-drive side doesn't have that, of course, because it uses a smaller bearing. Okay, right, next we're going to take it apart so you can look at all the little bits inside and try and figure out what's going on. Okay, that's been taken apart now, so let's look at each part and figure out what's going on, how they've made it, and all that. So first of all, let's look at the end cap. This is the drive side end cap. It's got a bit of knurling on the end there. You can see where it's been moving around in the dropout a bit. This just fits onto the end of the axle by being pressed on. It's a fairly snug fit, so it's pretty well machined. This is the free body. As you can see, it's got a 6803 bearing here and a matching 6803 bearing here. These are just pressed into the bearing seat. I've taken these out a few times, I've replaced them. The machining on the free body is pretty good. They're not loose when they go in, so that's encouraging. In terms of the ratchet and the pull system, there's three pulls. So you can see each pull here gets sprung by a leaf spring. Not sure if you can see that. Okay. These need to be cleaned regularly. You can see the back of the titanium drive plate, and now you can see the rubber ring, they've got the O-ring around it to prevent gunk getting in there. So that's the free body. Looking at the hub shell itself, you can see the axle as well going through. There's your large bearing inside. This is the ratchet, that's a titanium ratchet. That screws in to the hub shell. So the hub shell is threaded in the factory and they screw this in. You know, you'd be a legend if you can get that out. I wouldn't suggest it, but it is possible to get the ratchet ring out. There's the end cap, which is just pressed onto the axle. If you can see there's a slight colour difference where the bearing sits. That's because where the bearing sits, they've machined it to be very, very, very slightly larger, so it fits pretty snug. And that's the case on the other side as well. You can't really see it very well though. This is pretty light. Now, here we've got two washers which form the compression system. So what happens when you put the hub together, that goes on, then you put these rings on here, and this sits here and it all presses together. I'm using two here, but each hub has to use a different number based on machining tolerances in the factory. You work it out. Tune have got their own little system to figure out how many washers you need. I'll do that in another video where I'll show you how to service these things. But that's everything really, so very, very simple system. So, how good is it? Well, it's good. It's very simple, as you can see. And when it's working properly, it's great. I.e., you don't even know it's on your bike, it's very light. The ratchet sounds really aggressive, so it's good for scaring people in front of you. And everyone knows you're there. And it feels good quality when you hold it in your hand, and everything's pretty well machined and so on. However, there are two fairly big issues with this hub. The first issue is with the pulls and the ratchet system. Now, let's have a look. These pulls sit in a recess here, and then when they go onto the axle and then sit into the ratchet system, there's the chance that they will move, how do you call it, coaxially up and down here. There's nothing really sort of holding them down. Now, you might think that is okay because the leaf spring sort of holds them under tension and so on. However, well, look. The pull on the left is a new pull. These are slightly older pulls, but they haven't been ridden a hell of a lot, and the hub has been cleaned regularly, so they've not been neglected. You can see a lot of wear to the point where, well, this one snapped inside the free body ratchet mechanism and caused all sorts of mayhem on a different hub, but the same version. So the pulls wear out extremely quickly. Tune claim these are made of titanium. I don't know what grade of titanium it is, but it must be a softer one than the ratchet ring, the tooth ring. Also, back to my point about the pull moving up and down coaxially, if that's a word, in the free body unit. If you look at the edge here, you can see it looks like a sort of sharp ridge. Now what's happened there is that's gone over the edge of the ratchet tooth ring and has sort of worn a channel in it. And it's done the same on this one, and it's done the same on this one, and this was the one that snapped. Right? So that is pretty... I mean, I've never seen that happen in any other hub before, and I've ridden loads. I've never seen a pull wear out and snap like that before from regular use, and it's not been ridden in the rain. So that's the first major issue. The second major issue is pretty widely documented. It's this fucking creaking you get from it. Now, I've tried everything, and it comes and goes seemingly at random. I've tried adding more of these rings to add more compression to the bearing system. I've tried taking the lube out, putting lube into the ratchet system. I've tried changing the bearings. I've tried applying grease between the cassette and the free body mechanism, thinking it might have been the cassette. You know, all these things sometimes work, sometimes don't. And the sound that happens, the sound you get from this creaking, I've seen it in other YouTube videos as well. So, you know, their combination of parts compared to the combination of parts that I'm using are different. So the only, you know, common thing that we've got is this hub. So it's got to be something going on. Now, obviously, any creaking sound you get is going to be two objects grinding or writhing together. So something inside the mechanism is grinding against something else and causing this creaking. Now, it only happens when you're pedaling. So I suspect it's something to do with the free body mechanism grinding against something. Now, either that's the axle, the bearings shifting around on the axle because they're not compressed enough, because maybe this washer preload system is just not effective compared to something like a Shimano or extra light one, which you screw down on a thread. Or it might be the choice of materials they've used, causing some sort of grinding sound. It might be flexing because they've taken too much material out of the free body to make it super light. There's loads of stuff it could be, and honestly I've tried loads of things, but it still hasn't been solved. And the other thing is, right, Tune haven't acknowledged it, and any communications with them about this seems to just come up to a dead end. They just sort of ignore it, and I know that's sort of slagging them off, but they don't really seem to be doing much about it in terms of fixing it. And it's apparently was the same issue with the 180 as well, which this one superseded. So there you go. Those two major issues then are forming a pretty scathing review of this hub. If it didn't have those issues, if the pulls were good and didn't wear out like this, and it didn't creak, or if we could find a solution to the creaking, this would be absolutely fantastic in terms of weight, how it builds into a wheel, how it sounds. It sounds great when you're freewheeling. If you like really aggressive free mechanisms, it would be definitely probably the best hub there is. But these two issues mean that it's not.